Hi good people, Titus here for a two-part tutorial on how to create a flashbang effect in Unreal Engine. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. Alright, there are two methods I can think of to create this type of effect. One would be through post-processing volumes, and the other would be through animated on-screen widgets that you add and remove as needed. In terms of, well, I guess if you guys know of any other methods, comment down below. I'm always curious on that. In terms of which one's better, I would say for at least this effect, for a flashbang, it would probably be far easier to create the effect in a widget. You simply create a blueprint widget, you'd add an image source, you can basically set it to a white screen, or you could actually create something custom in like Photoshop and import that as an image source, and then just create an animation timeline in the widget that affects the opacity from like 0 to 1 over some timeline. You basically call the widget in Blueprint, and then off the begin play on the widget, it'll just run the animation, and then boom, you got your flashbang effect. For the post-processing, it's a little bit more difficult because you have to create a post-processing volume, which is kind of like something you see here, and you can do that in the actual level, or you can do it on the character. And then once you have the post-processing volume, you then can create a material or a material instance that actually does, you know, some special effect, and then you have to manipulate those values of that material through code. So there's a lot more, I guess, it's a much more complicated setup. I would say I've noticed that more, I guess more people doing game development seem to be doing it through post-processing. And I can only imagine that's because it gives them greater flexibility and control on the actual effect itself. So it's basically harder to set up, but it's easier to alter or change the effect later, versus doing it through something like a widget. So, but I mean, comment down below if you use widgets or if you use post-processing volumes to do effects, or if you have some other way. Always curious on that. But let's go ahead and set up our project. We're going to create 3 folders: a materials folder, an audio folder, and a blueprints folder. So this is going to be a pretty simple one. So I'll do underscore audio, and then we'll do underscore materials, and we'll do underscore blueprints, and that's our folder setup. We're going to go in the audio folder first, and I downloaded from freesound.org a pretty cool ear ringing effect that I'm going to be making use of. So I got that here, and I'm just going to drag it in. And you can, if you have some other audio source, or if you want to download one from the web, freesound.org is great. If you're using a commercial product or you plan on selling a commercial product, just make sure to check the license section. And you may have to check to see if you have to give credit to the artist or if they even allow you to do it. So definitely make sure. But here's the effect, or the sound anyways. And I actually like that one. Okay, and that's the only thing we actually have to import. So that's pretty much straightforward there. The project that I'm using, I should probably make a mention. This is the first person template with the starter content. You can, of course, do this with a third person, or, you know, like a blank project if you want to. Just make sure you check the starter content, because I'm going to be using some special effects from there as well. So it'll make things easier. All right, let's get into the materials section. So this effect only needs one material and a parameter collection. The parameter collection is basically, we need to create that so we have a way to manipulate the material in code. So we can change the values of the material through code. So that's the only reason we're doing that. And then of course we only have the one material because we're only creating one flashbang effect. So let's right click, and under materials, there's a material parameter collection. We'll select that and we'll call it MP underscore flash intensity. We'll double click, and this is pretty much it. We're just going to be adding one scalar parameter, so we'll hit the plus sign there, expand out the index. Default value of 0 is fine. For the parameter name, I'm just going to call it either flash intensity or maybe just intensity. And then we save it, and that's it. All done. The next thing we can move on to is actually the material itself. So we can right click, create the material. And I'm going to title this post-processing or pp underscore. And then I'm going to call flash effect. We'll double click to open that up. We need to change the skeleton of this material. So instead of material domain surface, we're going to change that to post process. And then we're going to scroll down to the bottom and change blendable location from after tone mapping to before tone mapping. I've been told that this will assist with anti-aliasing. I have not noticed any difference between this particular effect with a flashbang, but that makes sense because it's literally just a white screen and then it pulls off. But if you use post-processing for other effects, you may notice, maybe you have jagged lines or maybe you have blurry lines. That has to do with you have it set to, either after tone mapping or before tone mapping. So depending on which effect you're going for anti-aliasing, you may want to modify this. So I always do before tone mapping, just to be safe. All right. To create the effect, we're going to be using a scene texture. So we'll just right click, scene texture. Click on this one here. The default is scene color. We're going to need to make sure it's selected and change that to post-process input 0. Coming off the color, we need to mask this. If you search for mask, you will have component mask. We'll select that. It defaults to red-green. We want to make sure we check blue as well, so it's red, green, blue. We will then want to select or click L on our keyboard and then click on the graph to add a lerp node. We are then going to hook up to our alpha. And then for our B channel, we're going to be using a vector 3 constant. So you can just press 3 and click, and then it'll give you a vector 3 constant, which I know it as a color. In the event that you want to create material instances off this material, you can create a parameter in here, and then you'll be able to modify that parameter through your material instances. So if you say you wanted to create alterations to your flashbang effect, you can do so very easily just through material instances. To do that, so we'll just right click, you can convert this to a parameter, and we'll call it flash color. And that'll allow you to kind of slightly tweak different colors and different material instances. And then you could create an array, and then you can call those randomly through code as an example. So you have a few different options there. For this sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to be real basic, and I'm just going to use a white. And then we're going to plug this into the B channel. The alpha is what we need to modify off the scalar value of our material parameter collection. So to be able to do that, we right click and you search for collection parameter. Once it's highlighted, we need to set it to the one we created. So you'll notice MP flash intensity is here. That's the one we want. You can ignore the one with the underscore. That was the one for the demo in the beginning of the video. Or if you happen to name this something else, whatever you named it. For the parameter name, we're going to set this to the intensity. That name is what you named it here. Make sense? Once you have that, you can basically just hook this into the alpha channel and then hook up the output pin in the emissive color and then save your material, and you are done with the material section. So now we can work on creating the actual flashbang. Once we create the flashbang, we'll go into the character blueprint, and we're going to set up the post-process effect to actually use this material. But we'll get to that one, will probably be in the next video. So before we create the flashbang blueprint, let's actually take a look at our first person blueprint oh, here it is. First person blueprint, BP underscore first person character. So we'll open that one up. And it brings us in here. Since we're using the template and have obviously the default code here, we're going to want to come to the bottom and create a custom event. So add custom event, and we'll call this one our Flashbang. For the Flashbang, we're going to create 2 input nodes. One's going to be for distance, and the other one's going to be the facing angle. This will allow us to trigger the effect based on a minimum distance. So if the player's very far away, it won't flash them. If they're close, it will flash them. And then the facing angle will allow us to only flash the player if they're looking within a certain angle. And if they're outside of that angle, it won't flash them. So if the grenade's right in front of them, but they're, it's behind them, they're not going to get flashbang. So in your custom event on the right panel, you can just simply click the input plus sign. The first one we will call just distance. And that's going to be a float type. The second one is going to be facing angle. And that one's actually going to be a vector. And then we can compile and save. And that's it. So we're not going to do anything in the first person character. We will do one other thing actually, but that'll come later. So let's actually go back to our project, and in the blueprints folder that we created, let's work on actually creating this flashbang. Now, if you followed my previous Blender mini-series, you might have a static mesh that's actually modeled with the flashbang that you can use. I'm going to assume that you didn't, or if you have one for the marketplace, or if you made one yourself, for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to assume you don't have one, so I'm going to make a basic low poly simple cube, or maybe a cylinder, and you could always replace that with your actual custom static mesh later. So that way you guys are just focusing on the effect and the code. But yeah, let's go ahead and right click and do blueprint class. We'll do of type actor. Call it BP underscore flashbang. Double click to open it up. And then I am simply going to add a cube. I'm going to call it bomb, or whatever you want to name it, doesn't matter. I'm going to change the static mesh from a cube over here to be a cylinder. And then I'm going to give it a color, some random color, doesn't matter. And then I'm going to lock the scale. I'm going to do a 0.1. I'm going to then unlock the scale and do maybe a 0.3. Yeah. So I'll do a 0.3 in the Z, so it looks more flashbangy, like a grenade. And then compile, save. And that looks pretty good. All right, so we got the static mesh set up. The other thing we're going to want to do on this blueprint is we're going to want to create 2 float variables, one for throwing distance and one for rotational value. So under variables, we'll create our throwing distance. That is of type float. And then we will create our rotation value, and that is also of type float. When you compile, you will have access to set the default value. For the throwing distance, I think I found 1400 is pretty good. Rotational value, I think I like 350 or 300. I'm going to start there. And this will give us a way, obviously the throwing distance is how far the grenade is going to travel from the first person character when you press a key. The rotation value is going to be how much it, tumbles or spins in air once released. So we'll kind of get into how we set that up in a second. But yeah, so this actually completes the skeleton of the blueprint, so we can move into the actual event graph. Actually, no, I lied. There's one other thing we got to do. Under the bomb static mesh, you will want to make sure you simulate physics. And we can give it like a normal mass, but I'm just going to leave the default. So, because we're going to be using angular impulse and regular impulse, which only works on a physics asset. So, and I guess a note, if you are using my, if you're using the model from the Blender mini-series Flashbang, what you'll want to do, I can actually open that up just so you guys can get a quick look at it. Blueprints here. So if you happen to be following along and you're using the mesh from the previous tutorial, I would set it up to where all of the static meshes are parented to one single mesh. So in this case, I use the center one. Doesn't matter which one you use. And whatever one you choose, which in this case is number 10, simulate physics on that, and all the other ones don't simulate physics. The reason being is you don't want it to pop apart. So you can actually do that later in code. So just a small note, it's only relevant if you happen to be using the static mesh from the previous tutorial. But no worries. Let's go back to this one. So on this guy, we have the simulate physics checked. Single static mesh, we're going to go into the event graph now. We can get rid of the tick and begin overlap. We are just going to be working with the begin play. So when this thing is created, we're going to do a cast to BP first person character. If you're using the third person template, obviously this would be BP underscore third person, or whatever your player pawn is. And I usually don't recommend doing this, but just for this basic tutorial, we're going to do a get player pawn. All right, and then I'll get a reference there, so the cast will be successful. Off the first person, we will cast and get a reference to the first person camera, which you can see here. And then from the camera, we can get the forward vector. And then from the forward vector, we can then multiply based on our throwing distance. We can drag that into there. And that'll give us an impulse. So we'll drag off the successful cast, and we can do add impulse, and you'll see it has a reference to the bomb. And just another reference, if you happen to be following along with the previous tutorial using the actual Flashbang, make sure the reference you use is the static mesh that all the other meshes are parented to. That way they'll follow it when you add the impulse. And on this one, we will plug in our vector to the impulse vector, and then we will check the box for the velocity change. After the add impulse, we'll drag off, and we will do add angular impulse in degrees, and we will do the one that actually has the bomb. If you want, you can use one reference to the bomb and drag off both pins, or you can have them separate. It's however you want to organize it, doesn't matter. For the impulse on the rotation, I don't have anything to go off of, so I'm literally just going to right click and do random unit vector. Just a random number, it'll work. Drag off here and do another multiply. Just like before, we'll drag our rotational value this time into this vector. Oops. Multiplies those together, and then that'll create an impulse in as a rotation. And then we'll put that in there. And then we will check the box for velocity change. We will then set a fuse delay. This is when the bomb is going to explode. I think 1.5 seconds works pretty good. After that, we're going to call the function in the first person character, which in this case is Flashbang. And this will be where we have two branching paths where the code will continue to run on the Flashbang, and then simultaneously there's going to be code running on the first person character, or whatever your player pawn is, wherever you set the code up in the character. We'll set that up in the next video though. But in order to get a reference there, we have to go back to our cast, and if we drag off the cast, we can search for Flashbang, or whatever you named your custom event. And that would be this guy right there. I'm going to create a couple nodes to reroute it up, so this spaghetti code isn't as bad to look at. Okay. Alright, so this will be where we split and we create the function to execute on the actual first person character as well. But we're going to continue with the code on our actual blueprint. So we're going to do some more visual effects stuff. So we'll just continue on and we'll do play sound 2D. I am going to use the starter content explosion number 2. I'm going to multiply that by 0.1 because I just want it to be a pop. I don't want it to be a loud boom. Yeah. And then I will drag off that and I will do a spawn emitter at location. The emitter type is going to be the explosion. I need a location, so I can drag off my bomb and then drag off my bomb again and do get world location. And then we can hook up the vectors into the location. And then this code will spawn this emitter at wherever this little static mesh is in the world. From here, I'm going to want to do the ringing in the ears. The problem with that is, some of you may notice this if you use freesounds.org, this effect is very long and it's a little bit too long. So I don't want to play the whole thing. So a trick I can do is, instead of playing just the sound 2D, I can do a spawn sound 2D. So if we do spawn sound 2D, I can then hit this little arrow. It'll load in my sound because I have it selected, so it's highlighted, so that works. Or you can browse to it, doesn't matter. I'm also going to pitch this down to 0.4. It was a little loud. For the return value, if I right click, I can promote that to a variable, and then I can call it ringing ear audio. The reason I want to do this is because I can play it rather than wait for the sound to play out the entirety of its duration. I can stop it if I have it listed as a parameter, right? I can call it and stop it later. So that's the reason I want to do spawn, basically. And then this is another note to anyone who's following along and using the Flashbang static mesh from the Blender mini-series. At this point, you would want to drag out and do a set simulate physics and delete the reference. So it's just like this. And then you'd want to get a reference to all your other static meshes. It's probably easier if I just bring it up and show you. So that'd be this one right here. And the reason you want to do this is because when the bomb explodes, you want to turn simulate physics on all the child objects, so they all pop apart. You can even add forces to them if you wanted to, but just simply turning physics on is going to pop these things apart, so it'll look pretty clean for you. But if you're not following along from the previous tutorial and you're using just this simple object or a singular static mesh, we don't need this, so we can delete that. All right, and the next thing when we call out, we're going to use our delay on how long we want to play the ringing in the ears for. I'm just going to do 5 seconds. I think that's probably good enough. And then I can drag out the ringing ear audio, do a get reference to it, and then I can drag off that and just search for stop. And now I can just connect up the pins, then I'll stop the audio, draw off that, and do a destroy actor. Compile and save. All right, and that pretty much will finish off the flashbang. So we got the flashbang created. We just need a way to call it in the player character. So in our pawn, or in this case, the first person character, we can just do it off a keyboard event. So whatever your player, if you're doing third person or first person, or you're doing a custom game, go into your blueprint for the character player, right click anywhere in the graph and do keyboard and pick whatever key you want. I'm gonna try G for grenade. I think that works. And then when I drag off here, I simply want to spawn actor from class. Class I want to do is BP underscore flashbang. The spawn transform, I want to right click and I want to split it. That gives me access to the vector. I need a way to pop in a vector location. So this is what we're dealing with. We could get references to all sorts of things. I think an easy way to do it is if you go to the components tree, you can do add, you can do an arrow, you can do an empty, you can do a scene component, you know, kind of doesn't matter. We'll do scene component. So if you search scene, choose that, and we'll call, actually we'll do throw lock or throw location. I'm gonna drag it up, and I made this mistake earlier. Drag it really far in front, otherwise you're gonna hit the camera and it's gonna act all funky. Maybe a little bit back. So this won't show in game. So what you can do is just, it shouldn't show in game anyways, but we can hide it in game, check that. But yeah, it doesn't show up anywhere. So, but now that you can go back into here and just drag off your throw location into the graph editor, pull off that and do get world location. And then just connect up your vector to your location. And then we'll do a debug string, print string, say flash out, in case we messed up our code anywhere. We can see if that's, at least that's working. And then let's play it. So there we go, flash out. It explodes, plays the ring. You get your random rotation, sort of. And then yeah, loud ringing. Sorry. Trying to think if I think that's probably a good stopping point. So I think we got the grenade created, so yeah, I think we'll probably cut it there. Yeah, this concludes part 1. In the next video, we'll finish up the blueprint code in the player character to actually apply the post process, so you can actually see the effect firsthand. But yeah, if you like what you saw, consider leaving a like and a sub to help grow the channel. But as always, thanks for watching, and see you on the next one.